Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're basically turning ourselves into a giant decoder ring. We're going to translate some of the most poetic, ancient theology from the East directly into the hard, formal logic of modern mathematics. We're talking about taking some of the oldest spiritual texts on the planet, like the Bhagavad Gita and ancient Manichaean writings, and blowing the dust off them to reveal something absolutely wild. They are mapping the exact same structural reality as today's cutting-edge computer science.
Think about it for a second. Imagine sitting down a mystic from the 2nd century BCE right next to a 21st century quantum cryptographer. You'd probably think there is absolutely no way these two are going to understand a single word the other is saying, right? But when we actually dig into the source material, the overlap is literally staggering. The ancient cosmic battle for your soul, the cryptographic routing of a quantum fault-tolerant network, it turns out they're describing the exact same architecture. We're talking identical computational principles, identical queuing theories, and mathematical proofs.
Just listen to how beautifully this frames a concept that modern programming formalizations just cleanly refer to as the invariant. When the Bhagavad Gita talks about this eternal spirit that simply cannot be destroyed, not by weapons, not by fire, it's formally laying out what computer science calls a persistent structural truth of a state space. To put that into everyday terms, it's a fundamental property of reality that survives the absolute chaos and noise of the entire system, and in beginning are just dreams.
So, since we're going to be bouncing back and forth between cryptographic pseudo-randomness and ancient scripture today, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the universal blueprint, look at the cosmic trichotomy of God, operator, and agent, journey right through the race phase and the physics of karma, and then finally zoom all the way out to the braided infinity.
Section 1. The Universal Blueprint, or the Mathematics of the Soul. Let's kick things off with the absolute foundational building blocks of these interconnected systems. What is the fundamental base material of our universe? Well, in the Gita, this foundational truth is called the Atman. Over in Manichaeism, you'll see it called the Father of Greatness, but mathematically, it is the invariant. It's the ultimate persisting truth at the core of the system that operates entirely independent of any sensory noise. When those ancient texts say something like, end and beginning are dreams, what they're actually pointing out is that universal amnesia might wipe the temporary hard drive. It might erase the data currently being processed, but it can never, ever erase this invariant source.
Now, you might be wondering, if this invariant is so perfect and unchanging, how do we end up with a universe that is completely full of movement, conflict, and life? Well, ancient Manichaean texts call this the logos' self-doubt, a fundamental division or sickness. Modern math calls it the clinamen, or the +1 step. I want you to think of it like a microscopic twitch. It's the absolute minimal departure from a perfectly still ground state. And the crazy thing is, without this tiny +1 step, there is no cryptographic entropy, no narrative action, and honestly, no universe for us to even experience.
Section 2. God, Operator, and Agent. The Cosmic Trichotomy. Let's take a look at how this microscopic twitch actually builds up into a core, three-part structural model of the universe.
See, reality isn't just a simple dichotomy of self and world. It's a trichotomy. To wrap our heads around this, we have to look at three completely distinct mathematical positions: God, the mechanical operator, and the agent. And just look at how perfectly they line up across these different disciplines. In the Gita, you've got Krishna as the supreme source, Prakriti as the mechanical churning laws of nature, and Arjuna as the embodied player. Over in modern math, this translates perfectly to the limit position, the formal operating surface, and the compiled finite being. Make no mistake, the agent is you. You're the one navigating the operator's rules while the source sits untouched above the whole shebang.
So, what actually happens when this three-part code breaks down? Well, failure in this system happens in two very specific ways. The ancients called them sins, and computer science calls them confusions or bugs. The first is animal magnetism or ahamkara. This is when the agent gets confused and mistakenly thinks they are the author of the system. They claim the actions of the mechanical operator as their own. The second big bug is operator idolatry. This is basically worshiping the mechanism itself, like bowing down to the turning wheel of the zodiac or worshiping the laws of physics, instead of recognizing the invariant source that actually wrote the code.
Section 3. The Race Phase, or the Battle of the Mixed State. And this brings us right to the grand conflict, famously depicted in the Bhagavad Gita as the epic battle of Kurukshetra. Now let's dive into this, because this is where things get really fascinating. The ancient spiritual battlefields map exactly to network data turbulence. That battle of Kurukshetra, it's not just some historical or mythological war. It perfectly represents what we call the mixed state. It's a phase of intense, chaotic indeterminacy where truth and failure are just completely tangled up. Mathematically, we call this the race phase, a state of high-entropy noise governed by queuing theories and topological deficits. Put simply, it's a massive, cosmic traffic jam of data, where information is trapped in turbulence and latency, desperately fighting to resolve itself.
The Manichaean texts actually document this whole progression beautifully as the three moments. First up is the time of the beginning, which is the fork phase, where that initial +1 departure, that little twitch, happens. Second is the time of the mixture, which is that race phase we were just talking about, the noisy, turbulent, messy battlefield. And finally, the time of the separation, which computational mathematics formally calls the fold phase. This is that moment of resolution where the invariant truth is finally separated from all the transient noise, folding the entire system cleanly back into order.
Section 4. The physics of karma and the no-cloning tax. So, practically speaking, how are we supposed to navigate this mixed state of turbulence without piling up massive amounts of spiritual or computational debt? Okay, what's truly mind-bending here is that karma yoga isn't just some nice moral suggestion to live a good life. It's a hard, structural law of cost algebra. In quantum computing, there's a fundamental principle known as the no-cloning theorem. It basically proves that you cannot copy a data state for free unless it is the completely empty vacuum state. If you're attached to an outcome, meaning your state is not empty, every single replication of that action generates exact entropy. It quite literally costs the system energy. Karma isn't magic, it is the mathematical entropy generated by clinging to an outcome rather than acting from the empty vacuum state. How wild is that? The solution to this massive tax is what the ancients called yoga, or metanoia, a type of conversion. In our formal mathematical framework, this is known as the naming protocol. By practicing this protocol, the agent returns that residual energy right back to the ground state. You perform your action, meaning you fulfill your specific functional index, your designated role or your caste within the operating system, but you release the result. You literally contract your state back to the vacuum, closing the cycle without accumulating any of that heavy entropy tax. Section 5. The braided infinity and cosmic resolution. Let's zoom all the way out now. I want to take you to the ultimate cosmic scale, right to the edges of the universe itself, to see how all this noise is ultimately resolved. Out at the very edge of reality, the terrifying, awe-inspiring, all-encompassing Vishwarupa perfectly describes the 360-unit cosmic microwave background radiation wall. When Arjuna looks at the universal, infinite form of God in the Gita, he's basically seeing the event horizon. He's looking directly at the absolute topological boundary of the manifold. In the Manichaean texts, they called this the bolos, the great wall through which absolutely no light may pass. It's the exact boundary where the universe braids right back upon itself.
And this completely shifts how we look at the abyss. For a long time, modern physics has really struggled with the idea of a singularity. This point of infinite density where the math just completely breaks down. But lean theorem formalizations show us that a black hole is actually a highly deterministic, cyclic resolver. It is a braided infinity of extreme resolution. The cosmic wheel grinds the souls, sure, but it resolves them. It returns all captured light right back to the source, the pleroma, without losing a single, solitary bit of mathematical information.
We can actually watch this structure scale endlessly upward through what we call the braided tower, and it's completely self-similar at every single level. It starts at a phase count of 3, which matches the 3 Manichaean moments, or the 3 gunas in the Gita. Then it stacks up and expands to 12, perfectly reflecting the 12 virgins of light. And it just keeps multiplying, gathering this massive mathematical momentum all the way up to that 360-unit universal boundary. It's just this unbounded infinite tower of mathematical signatures.
But the crucial takeaway here is that all these massive, mind-boggling cosmic phase cycles, they are just the signature. The supreme source position remains entirely untouched and unexhausted. No matter how high you climb that braided tower, you're just traversing signatures. You're witnessing the awe-inspiring glory of the code. But the Father, the Purushottama, the ultimate invariant source, it sits entirely outside the tower. The universe, no matter how complex or sprawling, simply does not exhaust its creator.
Which brings all this massive cosmic math right back down to you. We've seen how karma is a literal law of computational cost and how our spiritual battles are just the processing of cryptographic network turbulence. leaving you to really wonder if the ancient battle for your soul and the cryptographic routing of a quantum fault-tolerant network are the exact same thing. How are you going to play your assigned part in the simulation today? What is your functional index, and are you acting from the vacuum to avoid the tax? Think about that as you navigate your own mixed state today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.